Queen Camilla starts surprise even those closest to the situation. Throughout the stormy period leading up to the palace's announcement, many assumed she'd play the mediator. Instead, Camilla emerged as a key supporter of William's decision to cut formal ties with Meghan. Her quiet but firm alignment, alongside Princess and King Charles, revealed a deeper consensus brewing inside the palace, that the Sussex narrative was no longer just controversial, it was corrosive. For Camilla to side against further engagement spoke volumes about the stakes. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. This wasn't about personal grudges, it was about institutional survival. By standing firm with William, Camilla helped anchor a turning point in royal history. The decision she supported wasn't simply about cutting Meghan out. It was about drawing a necessary limit in the face of relentless destabilization. With orchestrated media tactics eroding trust and misrepresenting the monarchy, the palace acted to reset the balance. This move wasn't a lashing out. It was a calculated defense of what the institution stands for. And in doing so, it reflected the kind of mature, internal reckoning rarely seen publicly in royal circles. 5 minutes ago, the palace did what many thought it would never do. It confirmed, without caveats, without fluff, that Prince William has officially severed all formal ties with Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Not paused, not reviewed, ended. And the way it was done, it wasn't just shocking. It was historically cold. This was not the typical royal statement full of soft phrasing and ongoing conversations. It was sharp, unmistakable, and it came early, 6:47 a.m. on November 30th, timed to hit headlines before the spin could even start. That in itself sent a message. This isn't a negotiation. It's a line in the sand. And let's be honest, this has been brewing for a while. This wasn't about one moment or one headline. It was a culmination of weeks of internal palace conversations, back-channel diplomacy, and relentless media pressure. Because the palace wasn't just responding to public noise. It was reacting to what it saw as a coordinated campaign coming from Meghan's side, media manipulation, carefully placed stories, and what insiders called a pattern of narrative control that directly challenged the institution's authority. The stakes weren't just personal. This wasn't about two brothers disagreeing or a family falling out. According to sources close to the process, if you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Figures like Princess and Queen Camilla and King Charles have been watching this play out and came to a joint realization. The Sussex media machine wasn't just disruptive, it was dangerous. Dangerous to the monarchy's international standing, to internal trust, and to the royal family's long-term survival. So, behind palace walls, conversations intensified. And it wasn't just about Meghan's public appearances or interviews. It was the bigger picture, a slow but steady erosion of the monarchy's image, with the press becoming a weapon rather than medium. For Anne, who has always been deeply protective of tradition and no nonsense about duty, this was a final straw. For Camilla, who has weathered her own media storms, it was clear the institution couldn't continue absorbing the impact without serious damage. And for Charles, as king, he had to weigh everything. Family, stability, global perception. But in the end, the consensus was clear. The monarchy needed to shut this chapter down, not just quietly, but definitively. That meant William, future king, and now public face of a more assertive institution, had to make the call. And he did. His statement didn't leave room for interpretation. There would be no future engagement with Meghan, no formal involvement, and no illusion of reconciliation. It was a hard stop, not because of hurt feelings, but because the institution had determined it could no longer withstand the slow drip of chaos that seemed to follow every Sussex-related headline. The message was as much for the public as it were for anyone inside the royal circle still clinging to the hope of unity. That time has passed, and what replaced it is something far more deliberate: clarity. The fallout has been immediate. In the UK, it split opinions. Some feel relief, others shock. But abroad, especially in the US, the move raised deeper questions. Was this William asserting long overdue leadership, or bowing to pressure from behind-the-scenes operatives trying to re-establish palace control? Either way, the result is the same. Meghan is officially out of the institution's orbit. And for the monarchy, this is about more than personal conflict. It's about institutional survival. It's about keeping centuries of legacy intact, even if it means publicly cutting off one of the most globally known members of the family. This decision also highlights just how central communication has become to power in the modern royal family. For decades, the firm's motto was never complain, never explain. But in the age of streaming specials, anonymous sources, and viral opinion pieces, silence stopped being strategic. It became risky. So now, the royal strategy has evolved. William didn't just set a boundary. He announced it, clearly and early, so no one could mistake what was happening. And it matters that senior royals supported this move. Camilla's endorsement was especially noteworthy. For years, she avoided high-profile public commentary, especially on internal issues. But here, she stood behind the decision. That wasn't personal. That was professional. Her support signaled that this was about safeguarding the family's structure, not about punishing individuals. And stance was more predictable, but no less powerful. She's always been seen as a guardian of tradition, the one who says what others won't. Her influence in these conversations can't be overstated. If she was backing a firm boundary, it meant the situation had moved past diplomacy and into damage control. What's more, the statement wasn't just an internal message. The UK's Foreign Office was reportedly looped in ahead of time. That detail alone shows how wide the implications stretched. Because this isn't just about palace gossip anymore. It's about diplomacy, public trust, and how the monarchy is seen on the global stage. So where does this leave the royal family? More united, at least on paper, more defined, and definitely more cautious. This move draws a very public line around who is considered part of the monarchy's future and who isn't. There's no ambiguity left. And that kind of institutional clarity hasn't been seen in years. And where does it leave Meghan? Outside the structure, fully and officially, there will still be public appearances, media moments, and personal platforms, but none of them will come with royal endorsement or involvement. That part of her life is now permanently closed. There's something undeniably final about it all. And maybe that's the point. In an era where every family disagreement can become content and every internal misstep can be leaked, institutions like the monarchy have to evolve. They have to draw the line not for tradition's sake, but for survival. That's the real takeaway here. This wasn't just about what happened between William and Meghan. It's about the royal family stepping into a new version of itself, less passive, more intentional, and far less tolerant of chaos. So yes, this is a dramatic end to a very public chapter. But it's also a beginning, a recalibration of boundaries, a shift in leadership tone, and a reminder that even the most ancient institutions can, and sometimes must, say enough is enough. What do you think? Was this a justified move by the palace or an unnecessarily harsh closure? Drop your thoughts below. Hit like if you're still shocked by how direct this all was. Share it with someone who's been following every twist in this royal saga. And subscribe for more breakdowns of the drama that keeps rewriting the headlines. Let's not pretend this is just another royal press release. This is a kind of moment that draws a bold red line across a timeline already marked with years of tension, tabloid warfare, and thinly veiled digs on both sides. But for the first time, the royal family didn't just send signals. They sent a decision. Final. Unyielding, and coming directly from Prince. And if anyone still thought the door to reconciliation might crack open someday, Kensington Palace just slammed it shut and bolted it from the inside. For a family that has built its entire public image on grace under pressure and unity over conflict, this is a historic shift. They didn't release a poetic message about healing. They didn't bury the statement in soft language. They took the gloves off. And that tone? It came after weeks of tension boiling just under the surface, both inside the palace and in the media ecosystem orbiting Meghan's every move. Let's not forget, this wasn't triggered by a single headline. It was a slow, deliberate drip of concern, quiet meetings, red flag briefings, a clear pattern forming around the Sussex narrative. Senior palace figures began to view the public commentary around Meghan not as isolated spin, but as part of a long-term, highly curated narrative war. And it was working. Royal protocol was being undermined not by scandal, but by strategy. The shift started behind closed doors. Palace aides noticed a wave of articles citing anonymous friends of the Duchess, each dropping just enough detail to stir doubt, defend reputations, or reframe past events. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't accidental. And what really set alarm bells ringing was the frequency, the timing, the consistency. According to those close to the situation, Princess was one of the first to say what others wouldn't, that the line between personal story and institutional sabotage had been crossed. She saw the long game, the interviews, the documentaries, the exclusive insights into private royal matters. It all pointed to one conclusion. Meghan's camp was reshaping her role in the story, even if it came at the monarchy's expense, and reportedly had no patience left. And her influence within the royal family shouldn't be underestimated. She's not loud, but when she speaks, people listen, especially when it's about preserving tradition and maintaining the monarchy's authority. Camilla, often seen as more cautious in these dynamics, surprisingly aligned with Anne. She recognized that this wasn't a battle that could be won through silence. And more than that, she saw that continuing to leave the door open to future collaboration or reconciliation was just prolonging the damage. Her support gave the final decision more weight than anyone expected. Even King Charles, who's been criticized for sometimes straddling the line between personal sentiment and duty, recognized that the stakes had changed. His silence over the years had always been strategic, but this time he supported the clarity. For the monarchy to move forward, this saga had to end with authority. And so it did. At 6:47 a.m., the palace published a statement that brought years of speculation, commentary, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering to a head. Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, would no longer be engaged in any official capacity with the royal family. Period. No middle ground. No revisiting the matter later. Just a royal MIC drop. The backlash was immediate. Media across the UK and the US spun into overdrive. Was William punishing Meghan for stepping away from royal life? Was this the fam retaliating after years of Sussex narratives taking center stage? Or was this simply what the palace claimed it was, a move to protect stability? Either way, the outcome is now undeniable. Meghan is no longer part of the formal royal fold. Not ceremonially, not symbolically, not behind the scenes. And while the decision may seem harsh, it was born from a real need to protect what was left of royal credibility. The institution had tried diplomacy. It had tried public silence. But the strategy wasn't working. The more the palace remained quiet, the louder Meghan's narrative became. And make no mistake, this was about narrative. Perception is power in the royal world. It's not just about what happens. It's about who controls how it's told. And with every new appearance, every emotional anecdote, every carefully phrased soundbite, Meghan's version of the royal fallout became the one people remembered. The firm was losing control of its own legacy, and that, more than anything, is what pushed the royal from behind-the-scenes frustration to public action. It also explains why William, in particular, was the one to make the announcement. As a future king, he's not just a figurehead. He's a symbol of what comes next. And his decision to draw a firm boundary wasn't just about protecting the present. It was about shaping the future. If this drama continued to spiral, it wouldn't just affect his reign. It would redefine the crown in real time. And William understood that. He wasn't just cutting ties. He was reclaiming control. It's also worth noting how carefully orchestrated the statement was. The palace didn't leak it. They didn't test the waters with palace insiders. They waited, then delivered it straight. That move alone underlined the seriousness. They weren't looking for press sympathy. They were making policy. And what followed was a rare moment of institutional clarity. The kind of moment that defines eras. The public, as expected, responded with a mix of outrage, support, confusion, and exhaustion. For some, this felt long overdue. For others, it felt like a dramatic escalation. But what no one could deny was a finality. For a monarchy that rarely speaks directly, this was practically a shout. And it's likely the effects will echo far beyond the press cycle. This decision draws a new line in royal sand. It tells future generations, and the world, that the institution will no longer allow itself to be shaped by external narratives, no matter how famous or familiar the source. That family comes second to stability. That the monarchy comes first. Some will see that as cruel. Others will call it necessary. But either way, it's done. And Meghan, she's now operating entirely outside of royal jurisdiction. That may suit her. She's long sought independence and the ability to control her own image. But it also means she no longer has access to the weight, the symbolism, or the institutional association that once came with her title. Her name may still carry the Duchess of Sussex styling, but as far as the palace is concerned, it's ceremonial and disconnected from royal business. The brand she builds from here on out, it'll rise or fall without a royal safety net, which makes this moment not just a public statement, but a clean break, one that redefines not only Meghan's position, but the entire tone of the royal family's approach to crisis. And if you're thinking this might blow over like previous drama cycles, don't count on it. This wasn't drama. This was structure. This was the institution closing ranks, protecting its core, and making it crystal clear that family tension won't be allowed to destabilize a centuries-old establishment. This is a shift in the monarchy's posture, less passive, more assertive, less ambiguous, more controlled. Because when institutions face an existential threat, they do what institutions do. They survive. So now, the palace moves forward, with tighter messaging, clearer lines, and a leadership style that's far less forgiving than the one we saw 5 years ago. As for Meghan, the story is hers to write now, but it will no longer be written with royal ink. Whether you see it as long overdue leadership or a ruthless shutout, one thing is undeniable. This marks a definitive end to one of the most dramatic, polarizing, and persistent royal sagas of the modern era. And it didn't end with a whisper. It ended with precision, with power. With William stepping into the spotlight not just as heir to the throne, but as a person willing to do what the institution has historically avoided, confront a problem head-on, in public, with no... For years, the monarchy tolerated the tension. There were attempts at private diplomacy, careful press statements, and even subtle acts of goodwill. The olive branches weren't just extended, they were practically delivered with fanfare. But with every step forward came another story, another interview, another quote twisting the narrative. The palace kept trying to hold the line, to preserve the illusion that the rift could be managed quietly. It couldn't, because this wasn't just a family issue anymore. It evolved into a credibility crisis. The institution couldn't continue to function if one of its most high-profile former members was allowed to speak as though she was still inside the room, while actively working against a system she'd exited. Meghan may have walked away from royal duties, but her image remained entangled with the crown. And that image, curated, carefully controlled, and heavily media-managed, was steadily reshaping public perception of the monarchy itself. That's what the palace finally responded to. Not the individual, but the impact. It's also why this decision wasn't made in isolation. The most senior members of the royal family had to reach agreement, and they did. And Camilla, Charles, they all supported it. Because this wasn't about personalities anymore. It was about protecting the institution. And once they reached that conclusion, there really wasn't a choice. The firm stance from William didn't just happen. It was shaped over weeks of watching the narrative spiral further out of the palace's control. And at some point, they realized that every silence, every no comment, was being filled in by someone else's version of events. So instead of continuing to absorb the damage, they pushed back, clearly and deliberately. Now, whether you agree with the decision or think it's a PR disaster, the truth is this. It signals a new era of how the monarchy will operate. Less passive, more calculated, and absolutely unwilling to let sentimentality sabotage stability. There's also something striking about the timing. Late November, early morning, just ahead of a holiday news lull where statements like this can dominate the cycle for days without competition. That's not accidental. That's strategy. They wanted this moment to stand alone, without distraction. They wanted the message heard. And it was. The reaction has been global, with opinions split right down the middle. Traditionalists are praising the clarity, saying this was the only way forward. Royal watchers who followed the chaos since 2020 are calling it a necessary reset. But others, especially those sympathetic to Meghan, see it as a monarchy hardening into something cold and unyielding, cutting out someone who once belonged, rather than evolving with the times. But again, this was never about feelings. It was about function. The monarchy isn't built to bend indefinitely, and when internal conflict becomes public dysfunction, decisions had to be made, boundaries had to be enforced. And if that means burning a bridge that became too unstable to walk across, So be it. What this also does is send a loud, clear signal to anyone else watching from the wings. Family or not, proximity to the crown comes with limits. There's no such thing as selectively engaging with the monarchy. You're either inside, or you're not. And if you choose to leave, the consequences are real, especially if your exit strategy includes undermining the very structure you once represented. For William, this was his first real test as a future monarch facing a modern, media-driven crisis that couldn't be ignored. And while some may critique his approach, there's no denying the impact. He's drawing a line not just for this moment, but for the future. The monarchy can no longer afford to operate like it's stuck in the 20th century. In an age where headlines move faster than protocol, the institution has to adapt. And this very public disassociation is the adaptation. Harsh, maybe, but also necessary. So, where do things go from here? For Meghan, the path is now crystal clear. There will be no re-entry, no formal involvement, no behind-the-scenes collaborations under the guise of diplomacy. That era is over. Her future is her own to shape, but it will be without any institutional association. And while that might suit her, it's still a loss. Because no matter how controversial the firm may be, its reach, its symbolism, and its legacy are unmatched. And for the royal family, this moment is about regaining control, reclaiming narrative authority. It's a pivot away from trying to manage chaos quietly toward enforcing boundaries publicly. And maybe, just maybe, it's a sign that the institution is finally starting to understand how power works in a digital-first world, where silence gets filled in by everyone but you. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Meghan. It's about the monarchy redefining its rules of engagement, about understanding that tradition alone isn't enough to withstand modern scrutiny, and about realizing that sometimes, to protect the crown, you have to make decisions that feel personal, but aren't. This wasn't petty. It wasn't dramatic for drama's sake. It was policy. And now that it's done, the firm can begin to move forward with a smaller circle, a sharper strategy, and a much clearer message. The crown is not up for negotiation. Let us know what you think. Was this the right move? Was it too cold? Is the monarchy protecting its legacy or pushing people away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you're still trying to absorb the weight of this decision. Share this with someone who's been following every twist. And make sure you subscribe for more brutally honest deep dives into the wild world of celebrity, power, and public fallout.